Living Single is a comedy based on six best friends who live in a brownstone in Brooklyn, New York. And it follows them through their friendships, their love lives, their careers, all that fun stuff. Now, I would consider season 1 to just be an establishing series. We're basically just getting to know every character and settling in. And nothing really pops off until the season finale. Now, what hooks you in is that it's relatable, it's funny, it's told through the perspective of Black women. Like, it's for us and it's by us. And everyone is different and has their own unique personalities. Now let's get into the season 1 character breakdowns. Khadijah is a career woman. She's an entrepreneur. She has her own magazine called Flavor, and her work comes before everything. Next is Sinclair, and she's Khadijah's cousin who moved to New York from Minnesota. Sinclair is quirky and aloof and not all there sometimes, and she works as a receptionist for Khadijah's magazine. Regine is Khadijah's childhood friend. She is bougie, kind of shallow, and a super fashionista. And she's always on the hunt for a man, a rich man at that. And those three ladies all share an apartment. Max is Khadijah's friend from college, and she is a very strong, confident, successful lawyer. She has her own place, but always ends up at the ladies' apartment to hang out and basically eat all their food and insult Kyle. Overton is a very good, very passionate handyman. He's quirky, kind of like Sinclair, but in his own way. Kyle is Overton's friend, who is his roommate, and he is a stockbroker. He's also a bit of a fashionista, and he's always seeing multiple women. And this is who they are for the duration of the season, except for a few changes. And those changes are that Khadijah starts dating an old friend named Scooter, Sinclair and Overton start dating, and Max ends up getting suspended for her job for doing what she thinks was the right thing. Now let's talk about the different romantic relationships in the first season of Living Single. Now let's start with Sinclair and Overton. These two were definitely meant to be together from the beginning. Because they're both so quirky, it's kind of like they understood each other better than anyone else could, and they just kind of like deserved each other. And by episode 18, they were officially a couple. Moving on to Khadijah and Scooter. Now, these two were just established as really good best friends. Scooter grew up with Khadijah and Regine, so they've known each other for a pretty long time. When Scooter comes into town, the relationship quickly turns to romance. It doesn't advance after that, and this is the first time we actually see Khadijah choose work over a relationship because Scooter's in the music business. His job is not in New York. He wants Khadijah to run off with him, and she's like, no, I have to run my magazine. But by the end of the season, he moves to New York, and they officially start dating. And last but not least, we have Max and Kyle. These two definitely have a enemies to lovers vibe because all they do is insult each other, but there's definitely some chemistry there. Now, in the season finale, Max finds out that she's been suspended and it is terrible. She wants to drown her sorrows in a bottle of tequila, and the only person that she can drink with is Kyle. And it isn't until the very final moments of the episode that we realize that these two have hooked up. And that's as far as we get with these two for this season. Now that we have a great understanding of who all the characters are, we can finally start pinpointing in on their lives from day to day. Now in this season, Sinclair and Overton kind of become the main couple of the show, and there's a lot of time spent on how they transition between being friends and being significant others. We also see Sinclair start night school, and that just shows that she's really growing and starting to put herself out there and just figuring out this New York life. And closer to the end of the season, she's in drama class and she stars in her first play. With Max, she starts out the season going back to her job after her suspension, but they're not treating her like she deserves to be treated, so she quits. She almost goes back, but she understands her worth, so she waits it out and ends up getting a job as a public defender. With Khadijah, we really see her struggling with Flavor. We really see her putting her all into the magazine. And she had some issues in the beginning, but then by the end of the season, we see that she got a television interview, and now Flavor is slowly on the rise. Like I said in a previous video, Sinclair and Overton become the main couple of the show, and we see them navigate their new relationship. One of the milestones we see is them celebrating their 1-year anniversary, but it doesn't come without its hiccups, because Sinclair kisses another guy. And I really like how this was handled. I mean, Overton did have his moment of anger. They did go off into their separate corners and cool down, but they were able to come back together and make their night special. Now for Khadijah and Scooter, they were together for a portion of the season, but Scooter got a big job managing a group and was touring all over the world, and they ended up going their separate ways. And lastly, for Max and Kyle, I mean, after the events of the season 1 finale, you would think that they would get together. They had a date, but they ended up staying friends. But over the course of the season, we see their sexual tension grow. By the season finale, they had another date because Kyle saved Max's life, and they were able to discuss some things and officially became a couple. I just really like the parallel with these two in the season finales. In season 1, from them just having a drunken hookup to the season 2 finale, them actually making the clear decision that they want to be together. First, in this season, they introduce a side character, Ivan. He is a student at NYU, and he has this huge crush on Khadijah, and he ends up starting to work at Flavor. In this season, they spend a lot more time at the guys' apartments than they had in previous seasons. Episode 23 is the first of 2 episodes that we see that were directed by Kim Fields, who plays Regine. We also learn a lot more about the characters' past in this season. We get more when we were younger stories from Khadijah and Sinclair. We meet Overton's ex-fiancé in an episode, and we also meet Overton's Uncle Tibby. Khadijah's half-sister comes in for an episode, and we learn a lot about their past, and we see a lot of their dynamic. And Max's mom comes to visit, and we learn so much about Max in this one episode. And last, the season finale of this episode is actually the first to-be-continued finale. Khadijah finally realizes that she is a workaholic, and she goes to see a therapist. And then she decides to continue to see that therapist on a regular basis. This is a huge deal when you consider how stigmatized therapy is in the Black community. To see a Black woman taking it seriously is awesome representation, and also kudos to them for casting a Black woman to play the therapist as well. Sinclair's acting career really starts to move forward. She was on an infomercial, and then she got a small part in Regine's soap opera, and then she gets a part in Robert De Niro's movie. And Robert De Niro himself offered her that role. For Regine, in the first couple episodes, she is not living with Khadijah and Sinclair anymore, but by episode 2, she moves back in. She also gets a job in the wardrobe department of the popular soap opera on the show Palo Alto, and by the end of the season, she's in a pretty steady relationship. Max agrees to run for alderman at the end of the season. Overton goes through a little bit of a career and identity crisis when his handyman skills are kind of failing, but then he realizes it wasn't his fault, and so he's fine afterwards. Kyle ends up getting a really good promotion, but he ends up hating it, so he creates a position for himself so he can go back to loving his job every day. Starting off with Regine, after many failed dates and a bit of a drought, she ends up in a long-term relationship with a guy named Keith. And it's going so well that she ends up introducing him to her mother, and that goes really, really well. But something very interesting does happen at the end of the season. Russell, who works for Khadijah at Flavor, tends to hit on Regine from time to time, and they share a very passionate kiss. And it leaves her shook. Overton and Sinclair are still growing strong, and in the final episode, Overton plans to propose to Sinclair, but everything goes wrong, and then to be continued. At the beginning of the season, Khadijah is single, and she's going on plenty of dates until Scooter comes back again and proposes. But they quickly call it off and go back to being friends. And last but not least, Max and Kyle, they're going strong in the beginning of the season. They have some hiccups. One of the big ones is that Max never told her mom about him. Max also said that it was okay for him to go out with another woman, and then he did just because he said it was okay. Kind of crazy. But before they even get to like halfway through the season, they end up breaking up. Now, in the beginning of the season, Overton was finally able to propose to Sinclair, and of course she said yes. So we see them starting to plan their wedding. Meanwhile, Khadijah is still going through some struggles with Flavor. The libel suit actually gets dropped thanks to Russell, but Flavor goes through some financial difficulties as well. And Khadijah ends up agreeing to a corporate investor. And after that, Flavor is really on the rise. Khadijah even wins a prestigious journalism award, and it was given to her by Susan Taylor, who at the time was the actual editor of Essence magazine. Sinclair gets her first lead role in a play, and this is when she finds out that improv and comedy are her thing. And Kyle even got her a job as a clown on a kids' TV show. Regine was really struggling this season. She broke up with Keith, and then she ended up losing her job on the soap opera. But she quickly turns it around and tries her hand at wedding coordinating, and obviously she's good at that. Max wins the alderman race and is just dealing with that job. And at the end of the season, there's a very bittersweet thing that happens as Kyle gets offered a job in London. And of course, in the season finale, we see Sinclair and Overton's wedding. So like I said before, Regine breaks up with Keith and pretty much doesn't have any kind of relationship after that. Khadijah also doesn't have much of a love life going in this season. She does date a doctor, but that quickly gets squashed. And Sinclair and Overton got married this season. So that really just leaves us with Max and Kyle. So in the beginning of this season, Max actually admits to Kyle that she wants a real relationship with someone and not just the physical stuff. And about halfway through the season, they start seeing each other secretly. And of course, all of their friends find out, except Regine. Now, Kyle's job offer left a really big question mark in their relationship at the end of the season. And one of their final moments in the season, Max tells Kyle that she loves him, which is a huge deal because a few episodes before the finale, she admitted that she liked him, and that was super hard for her. Now, me personally, I feel like this serves more as an epilogue to the series than like a full final season. Now, even though there were some pretty great moments in this season, I do have some issues with it. Now, as you may have noticed, Kyle is not featured in this photo, and that's because in the second season, he moves to London, and we don't see him again until the series finale. They also introduced a new character, Trip, this season, and personally, I don't really understand why it was necessary for him to be brought on. Yes, Kyle left the show, and Trip brought another male presence to the cast. And yes, Sinclair's spot in the apartment needed to be filled, and he took it. But when you consider the fact that the show was not moving on after these final episodes, you tend to wonder if it was really necessary for this character to be here in the first place. The other issue I have is what happened with Regine's character, because she was not in like the final few episodes of the series. Once she got engaged, she was only in like a few scenes after that, and then she went upstairs and never came back down. It kind of feels like they didn't know what to do with her after she got engaged, but she had an entire wedding to plan, and we would have loved seeing that, or at least I would have. And it was quite unfortunate that we just didn't get to see her in the final episode. But to end on a good note, I really do like how they wrapped up most of the characters' storylines, and that made the series finale one of my favorite series finales that I've ever seen. This video is going to be different than the other ones that I've done because we are going to be comparing where they started and where they ended in the series. Starting with Khadijah, she started off the series, total career woman. Her work came before everything. By the end of the series, she still is a very amazing career woman, but her job does not come first anymore. Next up is Sinclair. She started off in the series super new to New York, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and kind of aloof. And by the end of the season, she's married and a working actor. And she's about to jet off to Hollywood to star in a TV show. Moving on to Regine. In the beginning of the series, she was the diva and she was pretty shallow. She spent her time, as she would say, auditioning life mates. And by the end of the season, she found her millionaire, and it was true love. And she was also a successful event planner. Moving on to Max, she started off confident, super successful lawyer, very passionate about the law, and had many flings. Now, in the end of the season, she realized that the law was not fulfilling her anymore, and she realized that she wanted to have a baby. And she was pregnant in the series finale. There wasn't much of a huge difference between him in the beginning and end of the series. He started off super crushing on Sinclair and taking it very, very slow with her. And by the end of the series, they were married. And last but not least, Kyle. He started off as the successful stockbroker who also had many flings. And by the end of the series, he was heading up his company's office in London, and him and Max finally got back together. Khadijah and Scooter reunited at a spirituality retreat that Max dragged her onto, and they were able to work things out and got back together. They were both off to Rio by the end of the series. Regine finally found her millionaire, Dexter, and they got engaged. Overton and Sinclair were going strong this season. We got to see them navigate married life. And like I said in a previous video, they were both heading off to Hollywood, so Sinclair can star in her very own TV show. And last but not least, Max and Kyle. Now, it was looking pretty bleak for them because he moved to London and they broke things off. She didn't go with them. By the end of the series, Max decides that she wants to get pregnant. She uses an anonymous donor, and that anonymous donor ends up being Kyle. And once he finds out, they work things out and get back together. So instead of giving my iconic moments of season 5 for Living Single, I wanted to do something a little fun. I'm going to talk about how I think each character would use this app. I think Khadijah would start with a personal account, but she wouldn't use it that much because she spends so much of her time working. And that would lead her to start an account for Flavor, and it would just take over the digital world. Regine would definitely have clothing hauls, wig hauls, and she would do get ready with me videos where she would just spill all the tea. I feel like Sinclair would do a whole bunch of positive affirmations and things like that, but she would also leverage her account to use for her acting career and do like those acting challenge duets. Max would have a bunch of videos where she just had the camera on her friends and the text would be her roasting them. And I could see her doing what I eat in a day type videos, but there would always be multiple parts because she eats so much. Kyle's account would have like a ton of singing videos, but he would also do an outfit of the day. I feel like he would have content on like the stock market and giving advice, but because that's more professional, he might have a separate account where he only does that. Overton would have a ton of videos teaching you how to fix things. He also would review all of the new home improvement tools that come on the market, and he would also definitely have a video of him giving a tour of his tool shed. Lastly, for some reason, I feel like Regine's mom would have an account. Regine wouldn't follow her, but Sinclair definitely would.